Hi everyone, it's Kendall here, and before we get on to today's video, I would just love to express my gratitude and thanks to each and every one of you for your patience and understanding while we had no videos last week while I was dealing with the passing of my dear friend Kim. Her send-off was fantastic and it was really nice, if you can say that, to get away and spend some time with a group of people that I used to work with. Your love and understanding throughout this time was greatly appreciated. And I do thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. But what I have for you today is week number 12 of our Grandma's Kitchen Sew-Along, which is hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how I do it. I've made a few changes to the cutting requirements because I decided to do the side of the stars as flying geese, and as such I'm going to be using the 4 at a time flying geese method. So at the top of the screen there you can see the changed cutting requirements that I've got, and that will also be available in a link in the description box below to download for you to keep and reference. Even though I've eliminated the half square triangles that were making up that flying geese type side of the stars, we still do need to make some half square triangles, and that's where we're going to begin. We're going to grab our 4 light squares that are cut at 4 inches as per the pattern. We need to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on all 4 of these, on the wrong side of the fabric. We're then going to match these up with right sides together with our print fabrics, of which we have 2 in our medium and 2 in our dark, both as well cut at that 4 inches. We'll then take these to the machine and we will stitch 1/4 of an inch on each side of our drawn line. And with that now done, we'll just simply clip these apart, and I like to give them a quick press first just to set those stitches and release any tension that may have been caused by sewing across the bias. We'll then slice these in half on our drawn line and we will press them all towards the darker of the 2 fabrics. We'll then be ready to trim them down. When it comes to trimming down half square triangles, we all have a method that we like to use. For me, I stack mine 2 at a time by making sure that those opposing seam allowances are nice and snugly nested. I then take a 45-degree line from my 6.5 inch Creative Grids square ruler and I place that on my stitching line. I make sure that there is enough fabric on all 4 sides, including underneath the ruler and outside our measurement that we're trimming down to, which is 3.5 inches. Once I'm satisfied with that, I trim away those first 2 sides. We then very carefully rotate that around and we can now place our 3.5 inch measurements on those freshly cut sides, making sure that our 45-degree line is still along our stitching line, and we slice off the remaining 2 sides, and we have perfectly trimmed half square triangles. With our half square triangles now complete, it is time to move on to our 4 at a time flying geese if you are following my method. And for that we need to pull in our 7 3/4 inch large square of background or light fabric and 4 of our medium fabrics that have been cut to 4¼ inches. We are going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of all of our medium fabric squares, and then we need to take 2 of these and line those up on the diagonal across the larger square. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Once we have that lined up and making sure that our drawn line is actually running perfectly smooth across there, we will take that to the machine and we will stitch 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. With our stitching now complete, just like when I make the half square triangles, I like to give the entire unit a press first to settle those stitches. We then cut it in half along our drawn line and we press the smaller triangles up away from the larger background triangle. It should resemble a cat's face or a love heart. We then need to take the remaining 2 medium fabric squares that we previously drew our line on and place it on here with our line going from between the peaks of the 2 triangles down to that bottom corner. We'll then once again take this to the machine and stitch 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. With those now sewn, we will once again give those a quick press before slicing them in half once more on that drawn line and then pressing our remaining pieces out away from our light fabric or the background. We are then ready to trim these down, and I have a couple of ways to show you how. If my Creative Grids folded corner clipper is my #1 tool in the studio, my #2 is definitely this Ultimate Flying Geese tool, which is also by Creative Grids. On the top left hand side there, it actually gives you all the measurements that are needed to cut the fabrics to make any size flying geese, from 1 by ½ inch all the way up to 4 by 8 inches. You simply refer to that chart on the left hand side and it gives you which guideline on the tool to use. You place that guideline inside the peak of your flying geese unit and you just simply trim those first 2 sides. You then rotate both the block and the tool and once again refer to the same markings that you used before to place on the freshly cut sides and inside the peak of the flying geese unit, and you trim away those final 2 sides. As you can see, there is very minimal waste when using this method, and I just love this tool. If you don't have the Ultimate Flying Geese tool though, do not be dismayed. We can use a standard quilting ruler. To use the standard quilting ruler, there are a few things you need to pay attention to. You need to know that our trim down width is 6½ inches, so we need to know where the 3¼ inch mark is and line that up in the peak of our flying geese unit. We also need to pay attention to the 1/4 inch mark at that same intersection to make sure that we are trimming 1/4 inch away from the tip of that peak. To make sure that we have everything lined up straight, you can take a reference from the background or light fabric, as that edge is still a straight edge from the original large square that we cut. And once you've got all of that lined up, you can slice away the first 2 sides. Rotate everything around, and now because we had all of our measurements correct to begin with, we simply line up our 3½ and 6½ inch marks on the flying geese tool, double checking that we are intersecting the point at 3¼ inches, And your 45-degree line from your ruler should sit along that right hand leg of the goose unit, and you slice away the last two sides. So while using a standard quilting ruler is a little bit more involved and a little bit more thinking, it can be done. I'll get the rest of these trimmed and we can move on to making our pinwheel for the center. We now need to grab the 4 half square triangles that we created at the first step of today's video and turn these into a pinwheel which will sit in the center of this block. We need to lay them out as per the pattern, paying attention to where the dark and the light fabrics sit. I have that bottom corner wrong. Good on ya, thanks for fixing that. We're going to start by doing our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. After we've sewn the vertical seams, we do need to make sure that we press both of these pieces in the same direction. So press to one side, but make sure that when they're laying on the table and you're looking at them, that they are pressed in the same direction. That allows for when you flip the other one upside down to do the horizontal seam, that your inner section will nest. After sewing our horizontal seam, we are going to spin this inner section as we do have 8 layers of fabric all coming together there. To do this, we simply pick out the few stitches that are on the outside of the horizontal seam that we just have stitched. We then place it back upside down on the table or the ironing board, and we can move those seam allowances to go all in the same direction. In this instance, that is clockwise. Once you're satisfied that everything is how it should be, a little pinwheel should appear in the center of the back of the block, and then we can give that a good press and make sure that everything is where we want it to be. As I said, you do have 8 layers of fabric coming together in the middle there, so if you press to one side, it can be rather bulky. By spinning that inner section, it spreads that bulk around nice and evenly. We now have all of the pieces that we need to make this final block. So we'll start by placing our pinwheel in the center. Our flying geese units then go around the outside of this pinwheel. Our remaining half square triangles that we haven't done anything to yet go in the corners, making sure that the medium fabric is pointing out away from the center of the block. What we have now is what is referred to as an uneven 9 patch, and that's because not all of the components are the same size. So we'll apply our 9 patch construction rules in that we will sew all of our vertical seams followed by our horizontal seams. I'm not sure how I press this at this point, so stick with me and we'll find out together. In case you are wondering why I said I didn't know how I pressed these, this block and the construction of it was actually filmed back in November of 2024. So I'm discovering it at the same time as you while editing the video. It looks like I'm pressing in towards that flying geese unit on this top row, so I'll do the same on the bottom row. We don't need to worry so much about the bulk of those intersections, as this will have sashing around it and it won't need to be sewn together with any other blocks. If you like, you could press these seam allowances open, and I'm actually quite surprised that I didn't do that. I do, on occasion, as you know, press my seam allowances open. Now we do have a little bit of bulk coming together where the point of that flying geese comes together with the pinwheel. So I'm going to clip either side of the peak of that flying geese because we need to press towards our flying geese unit, which would mean that that intersection would have to bend over on itself. By putting these little clips either side, we can move our seam allowances in the two different directions and press those into place, thus alleviating a little bit of the bulk where the point of that flying geese is. Once we've done this, our intersections will nest when going to attach our top and bottom row. So we'll get on with that, and then we'll see how I press it after doing the horizontal seams. With our first horizontal seam now sewn, it looks like I'm just pressing towards the center of the block. Here is another place where you could spin all of those intersections, and you may need to do a little bit of clipping. And so today, or when I filmed this, way back when, I decided to just press towards the center of the block. So we'll attach our other row to this now, press towards the center of the block, and we will be done for this week. And there we have it. If you choose to make it with all half square triangles as per Pat's original pattern, that's absolutely fine. I just wanted to show you the option of using the 4 at a time flying geese. Now we'll take a look at what this block looks like on repeat when it is just stacked up side by side. It does create a rather interesting secondary pattern, and if you were to apply a different color scheme to the blocks and the parts that make it up, you could have quite an effective result, as I'm showing you now. If you just wanted to add some sashing and cornerstones to separate out all of those seams so you're not battling with any of them, this is what that would look like. Alrighty folks, another nice simple block, and changing out those half square triangles for a flying geese units just made sense to my brain. For this week's block though, because they were from the background fabric, all we've really done is eliminate a seam. If your background fabric has a print on it, however, with that seam gone, you have a nice chunky piece that you can work with and show off the design of your fabric. As always, if you've liked what you've seen today, I'd love if you would like the video, share it with a friend that you think may be interested, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and after you have subscribed, make sure you tickle that little bell icon. You'll be notified of all my upcoming videos and you won't miss a thing. I'll see you all again on Saturday night for our next Brackman Mystery Series. Bye for now.